Well, after another 1 month break, Formula One is finally back for the final run-in of the 2024 World Championship. 6 Grand Prix over the next 8 weeks will determine who will be the world champion. And Stop 19 takes us back across the pond to Austin, Texas, and the circuit of the Americas, one of Formula One's most intriguing circuits with fast sequences, long straights, and street circuit tight corners. And to talk about the race itself and what's been going on over the autumn or the autumnal news, I'm delighted to have Ben Hunt and Alex Kalinauckas. How are you both? First, Alex, how are you?
Yeah, very well, thanks, Bryn. It's been, as you say, an awesome break. If I'm not necessarily used to that, but I don't know what you've been.
It's been pretty weird.
Nice.
I've been walking around my house and there's people there, and they actually turn out to be my family. So
nice.
Who
As
knew?
opposed to the people that are in your house and are not.
Yeah, exactly. The others.
It's been nice to have that little break, knowing what's coming up, and all the busy races. So yeah, it's been pretty good.
And Alex, you're about to head off in a matter of hours over to Texas itself, to Austin, in fact.
Exactly, yeah. Heading off via Charlotte, which I've never been to before, but obviously I'll just see the airport. But,
beautiful. What a lovely place.
Good things.
It's quite a long flight, though. You all prepared?
I think so. Yeah, my problem, I've got such boring because I'm such an old person. I've got back problems, so I've just got a schedule of when I need to stand up and stretch.
What, on the flight?
Yes.
What?
Every 2 hours, yeah.
Okay.
Can you show us?
No.
You're one of those people that walks down the
It's in
aisle
here.
doing weird stretches and walks as you go down the aisle.
Yeah.
So if you're flying to Charlotte on Wednesday,
American
whatever
Airlines
it happens to
flight
be, Thursday, whatever it happens to
at
be.
some point tomorrow. Yeah.
Okay,
Thursday.
that's on the day. If you see a man walking up and down the aisle, it's probably Alex stretching his back. Give him a pat or a round of applause or a biscuit. Anything.
Yeah,
Give him
biscuit,
something.
yeah.
Right. Let's get cracking, shall we, to the news we've had in this autumnal break. And if I start with you, Alex, the big story coming out of last weekend was the news that Haas has announced this new technical partnership with Toyota, which the American team says will have both parties sharing resources. Now, from your point of view, this is a fair bit more a mutual benefit, they're saying, isn't it, that it's going to have for them. What will this new partnership entail? And is this the beginnings of maybe Toyota coming back as a fully fledged team?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's bigger news than I thought it was when it sort of first came through in terms of what we were able to understand from team principal Io Komatsu at Haas. And in fact, the list is so long, I've had to get my notes on my phone here to explain it to you, Bryn. It's effectively what it all comes down to is it's way more than a sort of title sponsorship arrangement. There was some suggestion when this was first raised early on in the year that that's what this might end up being, and that's well wider than mark. It's just it's completely in depth. From Toyota's point of view, their engineers, their factory drivers will be learning F1 processes and the cars themselves from Haas. They're only going to be doing this specifically as part of the testing of previous cars, TCP, test program, which Haas is going to be implementing for the first time from 2025. So there'll be no Toyota engineers embedded within the team at this stage. That's something that will sort of come further down the line. They're very open to that. Haas as well, they're enacting a recruitment program that's the first time in the team's history. They're a team of 300. They are hoping to increase to about 330, about 10% of that. But the Toyota deal hasn't quite had an impact on that yet, as far as I understand. Toyota's also, they're sort of making parts in a different way in terms of how things are paid for. So in one way, you could say this is a sponsorship model because effectively what Toyota produces for Haas, let's take a front wing as just a sort of broad strokes example. If Dallara, which continues to make other parts for Haas, if they make something for the team, Haas just has to pay for it. Whereas this time, Toyota's resources, what they're producing for it, it's all it's all packaged up as part of the deal. And obviously you've got the Toyota branding on the Haas car, which will be quite considerable in terms of sponsorship value. And then also the Toyota drivers, potentially we think they're going to be used as sort of a wider pool of reserve drivers for next year. I also don't know what you know about this, Ben, but possible that Kevin Magnussen might be a candidate still to remain as helping out part of the team, whether that's a reserve driver for some races, but also helping with that TCB program that I mentioned. But I think the biggest thing is that Toyota is basically building a simulator for Haas at its factory. It's never had that before. It's always used Ferrari simulators. So yeah, the first step back for Toyota, potentially, but if it is coming, it's a long, long way off because they're not committing to building an engine. And even if they were to do a title sponsorship branding exercise like Alfa Romeo, Sauber, it was never an Alfa Romeo. I don't really see how that can happen if Toyota don't build their own engine, because why would you, as the major OEM, want someone else's technology in the back of your car? So it potentially could be a step back, but if it is coming, it's a long way off.
I mean, I just think it's a good partnership. I mean, this is the largest car producer in the world, and they're joining Haas, who are a team moving in the right direction. And I just think it reaffirms everything that we've been talking about Haas this year, and them moving in the right direction. It's just another element to lob into the factor in and just see where they're going.
You mentioned very quickly that Kevin Magnussen retaining some form of role in a Formula One team. Ben, your experience around Kevin Magnussen, would this be beneficial to Kevin to have that toe still in the water?
I think so, yeah. I mean, it's kind of his experience as well.
Yeah.
Vastly experienced in Formula One, but other categories as well, and it keeps his options open. I think that he's also a friend of the team, isn't he? He's been and gone and come back, and I think they see him as a trusted benchmark. And I think it's sensible to have him on the edges with Ollie Behrman coming in, and Esteban Ocon in an unknown quantity in that car. It's sensible to have someone they can compare against. So it makes a lot of sense.
The benchmark is the key thing with the testing of previous cars. If that is what Haas wants Magnussen to do, that's what he'll provide. He was a known quantity. The team's never been able to do something like this before. So having a driver that they know very well, massive benefit for the team.
Yeah, he's low maintenance, isn't he? And, just adds.
And he can't get points on his license when he's testing, right? So that's a
Definitely.
How did it all come about, though? Because we know Komatsu would have a link there to Toyota. Is that purely a team principal Toyota chat, or has it been engineered through Gene Haas? What's been...
From my understanding, a large portion of it is because Komatsu is really good friends with the managing director of the Toyota Gazoo racing team. He was in the garage with him at Silverstone. They've known each other for many years, so I don't think that part of it can be underestimated. But I think more than that, this is a team that it sort of got stuck in a rut, I think, under Günther Steiner. I think both sides would actually admit that. I think he's sort of saying, I pushed it as far as I could. The Haas organisation that remained afterwards, and Komatsu now leads, saying, well, he'd taken us as far as it could go. And clearly, Komatsu's come in and identified areas where he thought we've not been pushing hard enough. And there's a massive opportunity, and I know people at Toyota well enough to get it over the line.
Facilities-wise, it's going to be using an existing infrastructure they've got in Europe, which is crucial too, and a very, very successful base for the World Rally team and for the WEC team too. So they've got this proven testing facility they can use.
It needed it as well, didn't it? Because the factory is probably the most inferior of all the F1 teams at the moment. It does need a lot of investment. So if they've got a ready-made location which they can utilise, it makes sense for Haas.
Don't forget, McLaren were using it up until recently, the Toyota wind tunnel facility. But that's the sort of complex area here with this Toyota deal, is that Haas are still using Ferrari's wind tunnel. They're still using their simulator while theirs is being built. And even when that's built, I understand they'll sort of do dual programs like Ollie Behrman, because he's a Ferrari driver, will be driving the Ferrari simulator a lot. So that's good in a way, but also it adds a lot of complexity. Like, how many times do we hear F1 teams say the fact that we're all under one roof means that we can... It's helpful for adding performance to our cars. Haas not only doesn't have that, it has it on like an epic scale.
Yes,
their headquarters is in America.
Yeah.
The team's based in the UK, the racing's based in the UK. They're now building bits in Italy with Ferrari, Maranello, Dallara, and now you're adding Toyota into it. And okay, that's based in Cologne rather than their headquarters being in Japan. But it's not just like, we can just go down to the design office on the next floor or whatever.
Just knock on the door, get on a plane, do some stretches every 2 hours, you'll be absolutely fine. Ben, let's talk about Mick Schumacher then, shall we? Because over the course of this season, with the merry-go-round, this carousel never stopping of the driver swaps, Mick Schumacher's name has been mentioned a bit by teams, tentatively, but never really seems like a definite choice. But it seems like Sauber may be looking at him for their second seat. And it says here that Mattia Binotto has been telling his home Italian press that we're definitely evaluating him. This is quoting, by the way. I've known him for a long time, having been part of the Ferrari Driver Academy. I know his strengths and his advantages. He's one of the names we have in mind. Is this really a genuine chance, or is it just noise?
I think this is probably lip service to the Schumacher family and Mick, given everything that was said before by James Vowles, where he... what did he say? He said something like not special. Not special. So
which he then wrote back on.
He did.
He said it.
Yeah, and kind of that was pretty nasty, but it's kind of what we were thinking. Mick's always been there, and he's done all the right things, done the simulator work, but can he deliver in a Formula One car? He didn't really show too much at Haas. He's obviously desperate for another opportunity. Would being at Sauber be the right step for him? Probably even not. For his career, maybe he is better suited to sports cars.
part of me wonders whether this is, I don't know how you feel like it's been, deflection from Binotto and how that whole Sauber Audi project is going. Like there's other quotes that have emerged over the weekend that he says if he was still in charge of Ferrari, he wouldn't have signed Lewis Hamilton and instead would go all in on with Charles Leclerc. And you just think that's sort of, I can see some logic behind it, but also why even feel the need to comment? And yeah, just the fact that we know what a difficult position Sauber's in and a lot of work that they've got ahead with their Audi future. It just makes me wonder why raise all this now, really.
This one seat, this empty seat, though, there's quite a lot of drivers that could fill this empty seat. If you're Valtteri Bottas, are you getting frustrated that no one is putting their arm around you, giving you a hug and saying, we want you? Because that seems to be the message coming out of this, is they're not prepared to nail the colours to the mast.
He doesn't need that. I mean, Valtteri is very much his own man. He's totally chilled with what happens. I think he obviously wants to stay in Formula One, but if they were to phone him up and say, sorry, mate, we don't want you anymore, he would take it on the chin and go do something else. I think that's the kind of guy he is. He's not seeking any arm around the shoulder or anything like that. He's just waiting for the announcement and then he can decide what he does. He just wants to know for his own future, what am I doing next year? What's my schedule look like?
Using your wealth of knowledge and your instincts then,
you did the same as me. You were like, yeah.
Yeah. I'll dive into it all. Who do you really think is going to have this second seat at Sauber? Alex?
We just know what the options are. Retain Bottas or go for one of the rookies. Colapinto's doing an excellent job for Williams. Bortolotto, who's impressed very well in Formula 2. Those are Sauber's options. I don't see this Mick Schumacher thing as anything particularly concrete yet. But if I were them, I'd go Bottas. I think known quantity, he adds more value in terms of his personality. Like a lot of these rookies who are coming in, they're okay, they're good, but I just find Valtteri Bottas' story more interesting. So yeah, that's the sort of that. The problem Bottas has got and his camp have got is, as you say, Bryn, it's not happened yet. If Sauber and Audi and Binotto were totally sold on it, like Binotto's been there 2 months now and has not yet committed to him. So that to me speaks loudest of all.
Colapinto's done brilliantly, hasn't he? For the first 3 Grand Prix of his F1 career, he's done really well. And there is talk of them being loaned out for a year or so on a deal.
I'd love that. I think that would be, for me, the ideal scenario for them, just to see what he does over the course of a season rather than just a couple of races. So for me, that would be the perfect option. But given the fact that they've got so much work to do at Audi, the sensible choice probably is going for that tried and tested Valtteri Bottas figure.
Well, let's stay with Colapinto theme and Williams, shall we? With James Vowles. Now, he's been very, very excited about his shiny new driver, Carlos Sainz, who's going to be joining from 2025. And the team principals now claim the team has the best driver pairing on the grid for 2025. Discuss, Alex.
I discussed it at length on Autosport.com. I re-ranked them. Obviously James Vowles only talking about his own team, but I went into all 10 lineups for 2025. And Ben, you had some, and a secondary piece had some thoughts as well. I think Vowles, he's got a point. They're excellent, Alex Albon and Carlos Sainz. I just don't think they're number one. I think when you've got a Ferrari lineup of Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc, you've got Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri potentially winning every race to the end of the season, and Piastri's not even 2 seasons into his F1 career. And then you've got Sainz and Albon, who, while excellent, who, while both very clever, both very engaging, both very just nice people, are yet to prove that they are out-and-out number 1 star drivers. And I think if you look at the other 2 lineups that I've mentioned, all 4 of them are those number 1 stars. You also, you've got Red Bull. I put this in the piece. Both of their teams are really hard to rank because RB, they don't have a confirmed driver lineup. We don't know how good Yuki Tsunoda is. Liam Lawson, there's a very small, sample size of his race experience. And the main Red Bull team, you've got Max Verstappen, who's, I would say, still the best driver on the grid in terms of sort of current ranking. Yep. But then you've got Sergio Perez, who I don't think should even be in that seat and probably shouldn't be on the grid. So I had to rank them down the order, so I put them 4th. So yeah, I take Vowles' point, but yeah, I think there are other factors that play that edge other teams ahead. But it's interesting that he's hired Sainz. It's sort of, he sees it as like, this is what we need to pull the team forwards because he's got that experience from Ferrari. He's been at McLaren as well. But then he's also talking about Alex Albon's a great leader. But it's like, well, hang on. So one's already a great leader, but you brought another guy in to be a leader. Well, something doesn't quite add up there. But still, I'm excited to see where that lineup goes.
I think it's going to be interesting to see how those 2 get on because Sainz had such a great relationship with Lando at McLaren.
And Logan Sargent.
And Logan Sargent, yeah, with, just the way that it kind of all pans out. We know that Alex Albon's a likeable chap, so we can't imagine too many problems, in the garages. But it's going to be interesting just to see how they gel. And I think maybe that's probably what James Vowles is getting at in terms of low friction potential between the two of them.
Ego-wise, is this, Albon always seems to be a fairly relaxed character. Does he need to step up his ego and become that sort of dominant force if he's got someone like Carlos coming in alongside him, or will that just balance out quite nicely, Alex?
Sort of yes and no. This was always the problem. So I remember talking to Jean-Paul Driot, really sadly, Dan's founder, who died several years ago. When he ran Alex Albon in F2, he knew that Red Bull would come calling and was going to promote him. There was even a power play, an argument between Dams when they were racing with Nissan in Formula E, where Alex Albon, in a parallel universe, that's his career now. He's a Formula E driver. Red Bull came calling, got him into F1 at sort of the last minute. But Driot's point was, I don't think this guy's political enough. He's not, especially for that environment, he's just not going to cut it. But he's not in that environment anymore. And I think James Vowles is very clear that he's become much, much, much more confident since leaving the Red Bull camp and joining Williams. So that suggests to me that he doesn't need to necessarily throw his weight around a lot more. But equally, you are who you are. Like, you can only change. Some people never change, but you can only change to a certain extent. So that issue's always going to be there with Albon. But actually, one thing I just thought worth mentioning, 100 races for Alex Albon in Austin this weekend. And considering at various points in his career, it looked like he might not make it. I thought fair play for getting that far. And clearly he's hooked up to the Williams wagon, maybe even more than any other driver, because Carlos Sainz, you're probably thinking, oh, maybe I can go still to Mercedes, Red Bull, back to Ferrari maybe at some point in the future. Whereas Albon, is he a Williams career driver now?
I think he has got it in him as well. If you think back to the last race in Singapore, he was very outspoken against Colapinto and the move that he pulled at the start. So he has that.
You hear it on the radio.
And backtracked as well, didn't he, on it too? He backtracked as well after watching it back. So he kind of looked, okay, he was quite...
That's classic Formula 1 driver.
That's true. Any racing driver actually is a racing driver. But what do you think then about say, Albon? Is it that he's happy at Williams? He'll sign a contract to the end of his career at Williams, and that'll just be he's Matt Letitia. He's happy to stay at one club.
Yeah, I could see that. Him staying there. Partly because I don't think any other teams are interested in taking him at the moment. Right. So that asks another question: is he the right man for the job? Depending on where they want to get to. I mean, they're in a transition. They want to move forward. For the purpose at the moment, he's fine. He's driving them forward. He can deliver on Sundays. Perfect. But if they want to make the next step and fight for podiums and then wins and then championships, has he got that in him to do that? I don't know. We haven't seen that yet.
No. I have a script. People who watch this and listen to this, they may not be fully aware we have a script that we try to run to, and often
Did it have Matt Letitia in it?
It didn't have Matt Letitia in it. No, and I'm going to go slightly off piste as well. So our poor producer is going to be pulling his hair out right now. But just staying on driver lineups very, very quickly. You mentioned Perez at Red Bull. Now we know he's got this deal that extends beyond 2025, but that could be pulled away quite quickly. So is the likelihood that when we look at driver lineups and seats available, that there might be one extra seat come 2025? At the end of this season, we'll find out, okay, Perez has been pulled from his seat and somebody else is going to be transplanted in.
But who'd you pick? I mean, I think that's the weird scenario that we're in at the moment. The Red Bull driver program, as fantastic as it was, it kind of ground to a halt because Max was just so good. And they felt there was no need to push talent through at the same rate. But now all of a sudden they find themselves in an awkward position of not having a ready-made replacement to, replace Sergio Perez with. And they clearly decided that Daniel wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
I just think on Perez at Red Bull, I think any Red Bull driver other than Max Verstappen, you almost don't have a contract. You have the terms of your contract that says what you get paid if you do these races and things like that. But if they decide you're gone, they wouldn't do it between Austin and Mexico, but just say there was a race at the end of the season, they're like, Checo, that's it, or any of their drivers, they will do it because they have that power to do it. And obviously they're not lacking for funds if they needed to pay anyone off or whatever. And as we know, the cliche of a contract in Formula One is not really worth the paper it's written on. So they tried to do something quite clever in giving him a longer term contract extension, a sort of carrot approach. It was kind of weird. The carrot approach from Christian Horner and the stick approach from Helmut Marko every single round. And understandably, I don't think that worked at all for Sergio Perez. But it clearly didn't work.
Yeah.
And he's got it. He's got the paper, but he hasn't got the reassurance.
Yeah.
And at Red Bull, I don't think you ever do.
He got hit by the carrot a few times, and that really confused the matter, didn't it? That was the issue. So, I mean, very gut instinct again. Are we likely to see Perez in that car 2025?
I don't think you can say definitively at all. I think Christian Horner's come out openly and said it. We can't afford to have him potentially in the car if he performs at this level, because at the rate it's going, they're going to lose this Constructors' Championship, and that it's a prestige hit, but it's a massive financial hit as well.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, we started the year talking about Max, whether he would stay at Red Bull for this year, and we're finishing the year with, is Sergio Perez going to be in the car next year? I mean, we could have seen both of them depart at the end of this year. So,
I mean, I think almost a more interesting question is, does it have an all new driver lineup in 26? Is it George Russell, Oscar Piastri? That, I mean, obviously they have their own contracts and things like that, but to get the program restarted or to have some sort of comprehensive change, that's potentially what they're looking at.
Although Helmut Marko has says that he's looking at the young driver program above George Russell, isn't he? He's already said, although what Helmut Marko says, it depends which stick he's holding, doesn't it, at the time. Let's go back to the script then, shall we? Ben, during the autumn break, I'm going to read this so the producer's happy, right? During the autumn break, we got confirmation from Renault that they are going to be shutting down their F1 power unit side in Viry. That's their engine development base in France. For now, they say they're going to be exploring new projects, right? Which is a lovely word, lovely term anyway, or exploring other projects, I should say. But what do you think the repercussions are going to be for this announcement and Alpine becoming a customer team for 2026 and beyond?
yeah, I think I can understand why the people at Renault are upset, because they've invested a lot of time and money and effort into developing this engine. But we've seen over the last however many years it is now, the engine they produce isn't good enough. And they are making that decision to go as a Mercedes customer. And you only need to look as far as McLaren to see the benefit of what having the right engine in that car does for you. It gives you a boost of power, you've got a little bit of reliability, and then you can also concentrate on other matters, i.e. designing the car. So I actually think that it is, as painful as it is at the moment, I think the long-term goal is served by swapping and going for Mercedes power. It makes a lot of sense, and I think that by cutting off that division allows them to bring everything. We're talking about under one roof. Everything is now kind of under one roof. They're waiting for the engine to come in, but they don't need to focus on anything other than themselves at Enstone. And I think that galvanising attitude is the way that they drive forward. You know, they've got Briatore there. They've got Oliver Oakes. That's the new management structure, and they need to move forward. And I think that this now gives them some sort of clarity. They've cut off that. Yep, we're not going to go back to using our own engines. We're focused now on doing this, and stick on it.
Briatore's really brought in the changes, hasn't he? He's really kind of got in there and just messed everything up.
Well, I mean, I'm sure it's organised chaos from his point of view. But, I think, Ben, what you say about McLaren is the really handy example, because I spoke to Zach Brown at Monza at the Italian Grand Prix, and he was saying that actually if you look at how that team has changed, and it's had various ups and downs to reach this, what appears to be firmly back on track to long-term success for McLaren. One of the big ups was in 2021, when they won that race famously with Daniel Ricciardo. Lando Norris could have won at Monza, probably should have won at Sochi. Like they suddenly look like, right, we're back. And it would prove to be a false dawn, because what Zach's point of view, and I think there is an element of politicking going on in there, because you then had Andreas Seidel leave, you had James Key leave, things like that. He's obviously very keen to back his current team that he's got in place and who have done very successfully. But Brown is adamant. Change to Mercedes power was what got us a big boost in 2021. So you can really see why Alpine, which has struggled, which to be fair, it tried different routes. Like it tried to get the other teams to agree for it to, for them not to freeze development and make a lot of change under sort of force majeure methods. And obviously all the other teams said no, because that's just what they do in Formula One. But potentially this route is an automatic upgrade. And so therefore there I can see the logic. It's brutal. It doesn't make a lot of, as my high-tech notes almost go flying there. It doesn't make a lot of sense from a traditional Formula One point of view. And equally, I mean, how are they going to get around all the very tight French employment laws and things like that, and the unions they've got involved there? That is almost that's way more complicated than just deciding, right, enough of the engine department, we'll go with someone else.
That's tricky, but that's what I'm saying. That kind of needed to happen to move on. And I just think that they now start with a blank sheet of paper and they know where they stand and they can move forward.
Expect new exciting things from Alpine.
I didn't say that.
Perhaps, question mark. Final question before we move on to COTA itself, before you get on your plane and start doing your stretches every 2 hours. Michael Andretti, the news that Michael Andretti is stepping down from day-to-day running from the Andretti team. How much is this going to damage their chances of getting on the grid? And what can you tell us about him stepping down, who's coming in, that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's quite interesting because he's handing over control. I think it's actually possibly a good move. Obviously, when he made the noises about joining Formula One, it riled a lot of teams existing in Formula One. So by him moving away from the operation, all of a sudden it's got a different face. It might not even be called Andretti by the time it comes into Formula One. It may be something else. You never know. But it takes away the stigma and the rumpus that he caused at the start. So actually, I was thinking, that could be a positive. Stepping away from the day-to-day business. If they try for a second attempt to try and get into, to the Formula One grid for 26, they're actually progressing with everything which they had all in plan. The staff now, 260 staff at Silverstone. They're still building the car chassis ready before the new year. They're doing crash testing at Cranfield. So they are full steam ahead with the operation. It's just under what guise it will be known as when they do come into Formula One, if indeed they come into Formula One. The attitude within Andretti is that the FIA should be now taking, the lead on this, because obviously they're they're in control as to who should be coming into Formula One rather than Liberty or Formula One management.
Be nice to have Andretti as a name on the grid, though, wouldn't it, Alex, from a romantic point of view?
Which is obviously the key way out view motorsport. And actually, that's very true. I think that emotion and things like that is critical when it comes to enjoying this. Because honestly, we know this very well. Like the F1 world, the motorsport world can be crushingly soulless at times. So it's nice to have little things like that in there. It's interesting, the Andretti one. I think at certain points, I've been quite frustrated with the arguments. A lot of this sort of they've not let us in. It's because F1's elitist. It's like, you're talking about motorsport. This has always been, if you look back through, we've got the magazine covers here, Autosport, 75 years, Formula One World Championship, 75 years. It's always been incredibly wealthy people driving incredibly expensive things. This is not an NHS trust decision. It's always been elitist. So that sort of element of it wound me up probably too much, as clearly my rant shows. But equally, a load of the arguments put forward for not letting them on the grid just don't make any sense. This dilution thing, protecting the other, but also, things like, some of the tracks, I think it was Christian Horner, some of the tracks won't be able to accommodate them. You've got F1 selling hospitality packages that involve sitting in empty pit garages at various races. It's just a nonsense, a lot of what it is. And I always just think when it comes to F1, so long as you're not getting into a 2010, 11, 12, the teams there that came in were sold a completely different business model and obviously failed. So long as that's not happening, where's the harm in having an extra team? And if it brings more interest in the US with that name, Andretti or otherwise, US drivers potentially, how is that not a good thing for Formula One?
Yeah, and more drivers on the grid as well. I mean, we're talking about some really good rookies coming through, and of course it's another potential for another 2 cars, another 2 slots on the grid. And who doesn't want that? I mean, we all want that.
The McCluck chicken finger licking Andretti motorsport team coming to Formula One soon. That'd be a good name, wouldn't
Very elitist attitude from there, Bryn.
I think it would appeal to the masses, that's what I'm saying. Now, let's turn our attention to COTA, shall we, into the Grand Prix. And before we do, a quick look at the points, because it's been a while, so a quick look at the points. And it's Max Verstappen in the Drivers' Championship that leads the way, 52 points ahead of Lando Norris, as we know, in second, chasing him down. Then it's Charles Leclerc in third. He's on 245 points. That's 34 behind Lando Norris. Then it's Piastri on 237. And then the rest, pretty much, Carlos Sainz 190, Lewis Hamilton 174, and George Russell on 155. Still a few yet to score, mainly Sauber. They're at the bottom there, haven't scored. We look at the constructors, and it is McLaren that lead the way, 516 points, 41 ahead of Red Bull. They're 34 ahead of Ferrari. Mercedes are on 329 points. And at the bottom, as we say, Sauber still yet to get off the mark. Will that ever happen? This season, will Sauber score?
I can't see it. I don't. I think it's too close in terms of, you've got a top 4 sort of Class A category, if we can call it that, and we often have done at Autosport. That's 8 points. That's 8 places, and they all score points. So therefore, you've got 6 other teams competing for 2 spots, and it's so close. I think the car's not bad. It's not like a historically bad car. It's just always.
It's everyone else has made a better step, and that's exactly where they're at. And will they finish with a point this year? Yeah, I don't know.
At least they can change the wheels now. Get that done in a Grand Prix. Now, let's turn to COTA, as we say, proper look then. Alex, speaking exclusively to Autosport, during the downtime, Max Verstappen has claimed that the worst has gone now for Red Bull for 2024. It's all behind them, telling us that the Baku floor upgrade was, and this is a quote, a good step for us. I do think we are moving in the right direction. Now, it will take some time. You can't turn things around in 1 or 2 weeks, but I think the team was also happy with what they saw in Baku. So do you believe that Red Bull is back on its way to maybe finishing the season on a high?
Yeah, it's not quite as sort of, I don't know, forthright gushing as, we fixed it and we're completely back and we're going to win every race. I think he's been very careful in his words. I think he's very much, look, we think we've got through the worst of it. We hope we're going to get back there. But if we're on the right track, that only means catching up to McLaren. Like, they were still completely destroyed in Singapore.
Yeah.
Like, I know Lando Norris nearly put it in the wall twice, but that was as comprehensive a drubbing as you're ever likely to see. And actually, it should have been worse for Red Bull. The Ferrari team completely underperforming in Singapore. I think there's a case that Max Verstappen would have been grateful to have finished sort of 4th, maybe 5th. So there's a lot of work Red Bull needs to do in terms of catching up. They have got an upgrade package coming in Austin, and that's going to be looked at. But equally, McLaren keep saying, We've held back on our floor. We think it's faster, but we don't want it to ruin the handling characteristics of our car. So therefore, there's still more potential to come from that team. So yeah, what I'm intrigued about is Max himself at Austin, because it's really interesting. This is often held up as a track where Lewis Hamilton is like the master of it, and he has obviously been very successful. And I think he holds the record for most wins there, off the top of my head. Max has been superb there the last few years. 2021, when he was really ill, we now know he's still suffering blurred vision from that crash at Silverstone. 2022, comprehensively destroyed everyone. Last year, brakes weren't working, and he still held on to win. So this, I think, if it's almost going to be a bit like Singapore again. We saw Perez basically had the Red Bull sort of where it was, and they've added Perez in there, and Max made the difference. And I think that will be on full display in Austin this weekend, just because I think he's superb there.
Yeah, I agree. It's a funny thing to say, we're back when he was so far adrift of Lando Norris in Singapore. But I think if you look at the general picture, and there are more positives, the fact that he was there in the mix, finishing on the podium at least. And of course, Sergio Perez as well had a good race in Baku as well, and would have been probably on the podium, could have won had it not been for that last lap collision. So maybe, there is a little bit of optimism within the Red Bull camp.
He doesn't need to win the Grand Prix to win the championship. He just needs to finish on the podium, essentially to retain the title.
That's not his style, though.
It's not his style, no, and it's not any racing driver's style, is it? I'll make do with a 3rd or a 2nd. So this upgrade package then for Red Bull, head of COTA, what's it look like? Any ideas? Crystal ball moment?
I mean, terrible predictions famously throughout my time at Autosport, but I think all sensors on the floor, and again, not trying to sort of undo some of the damage, let's face it, that they inflicted early on in the season with things not going the right way. And again, we know it's the biggest performance differentiator on a ground effect car. So yeah, the only thing we can really say for certainty about this Red Bull upgrade is it's pivotal, it's critical, it's the most important thing to be watching. I know Haas have got some upgrades that obviously it's going to not get as many clicks and interest and eyeballs, because it's right now. What have Red Bull been doing since they were so awful at Monza? That's what they say is like the low ebb of the season. In the intervening time, now they have to come up with something that could potentially get them.
It's a big moment, I think, because this is obviously post Adrian Newey now. So it's kind of a big symbol as to say, this is us moving forward. This is life after Adrian, and we can design stuff that works. If it doesn't, then all the question marks are going to resurface, So it's a big race for Red Bull.
As you say, they've done well there with Max. Has done well there over the last number of years, and it'd be good if he can get his season back on track, or at least maybe stem the flow a little bit of the points deficit. Every Grand Prix that goes past, the number of points that Lando needs to gain on him goes up. Although we are always ignoring sprint Grand Prix or sprint races coming in the Grand Prix weekends, and we know there are quite a few of those coming up.
One at Austin.
One at Austin, yeah, exactly. So it could even be this 8.7 points. good English there. That he needs to regain each Grand Prix might come down. It might expand. We should have to see what happens in a few days' time. Upgrade-wise then, Ben, McLaren have also got a few upgrades in their back pocket. Andrea Stella has said that they're reluctant to use them. It seems like an obvious question. Why is he so reluctant? Is it because they're just doing so well without them and he's worried about taking a wrong turn?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can go down an avenue. Once you've brought an upgrade to the car, start chasing things, and then you start running in the wrong direction. We've seen it so many times with Mercedes, all those false storms and promises and, new moments of, finding the silver bullet, as Toto uses the phrase that he uses quite a lot. But I think you've got to be cautious, and that's McLaren's strength over the last couple of years. The fact they've been so cautious about what they bring to the car. They don't just chuck it on just for the sake of it. They really want to know that what they're bringing is going to bring performance, because that's obviously crucial. And they need to keep going, don't they? I mean, if there's a chance that Lando can win this championship, great, but obviously the main prize is the constructors and winning that, and obviously the bonus that brings to all the staff. So that is rightly the focus.
Holy cows, that's another one that Toto Wolff loves.
Holy cows.
There's no holy cows in Formula One. He loves to say it.
It's sort of rolling a dice, isn't it? There's so many cliches we can roll out here. So it's like a football team, using the old football analogies here of, you're leading 1-0. Do you sit back and protect the lead, or do you go for glory and then end up shipping 2 goals and shooting yourself in the foot?
Well, this is McLaren's strategy, isn't it? It's always protect that lead. Yeah. It's kind of, we've seen the philosophy with the way they're managing their drivers. It kind of seems as if they're reluctant to take a gamble. They're very cautious. We've spoke before about them learning to win again and manage those pressure situations. And they don't want to be in a situation where, to use another sporting phrase, they want to drop the ball. And go backwards and allow Red Bull, who are coming strong potentially at this race, to leapfrog them in the championship.
I do think on that though, that it served them very, very well. Like they're scared of what the other teams did. So I think Ferrari's probably the most famous example, because they had all that high-speed bouncing after introducing a floor upgrade. We know that Red Bull had a similar thing. Introduce a floor upgrade that looks theoretically higher peak levels of downforce in the wind tunnel. Then if it suddenly makes the car undrivable for the drivers, you're at a net loss. That's what McLaren have wanted to avoid and have successfully done it so far. But it does leave them exposed if, as Red Bull clearly hopes, they've solved the problems, can add that theoretical downforce as that goes flying again back on the car, then that's where McLaren suddenly find themselves potentially in trouble.
For those listening on the podcast, by the way, Alex has got his phone balanced on his knee. So when he said that's that going again, he's talking about his phone deciding to take a flying leap off of his knee there and disappear off. He's caught it brilliantly, though. So those watching will just see maybe an England call up for you.
Those reflexes. Yeah.
What about the circuit itself then, Kota? It's had a bit of a change since last time out, resurfacing, we know. And they've got some fake gravel areas, some AstroTurf's gone down. They're trying to marry up a circuit that can be used for MotoGP and Formula One, which is very, very tricky. But the circuit itself, I mean, it's going to be better having these changes?
I think so. Austria worked, didn't it, this year with the changes that they made, and that obviously hosts some MotoGP as well. So I think it was a sensible thing to do, and I'm looking forward to this weekend. I think it's going to be a good race.
Just to be clear, it is real gravel. It's the fake element of it is that it's stuck down.
It's stuck down, exactly. Yes. No, exactly. It's real gravel. Yes, it's not. Yeah,
it's
made out of
function as a
polystyrene.
Exactly. Or like, I don't know, CGI generator or something.
Yeah.
The F1 probably have sold the rights to the stones or something to get that on. But anyway, the most important thing here, I think the track limits thing, yes, was solved very well in Austria, saw it at Silverstone as well. And again, because we know he's upset about not getting enough credit, the FIA have done a lot of excellent work. I know, this is the FIA president. It doesn't get to it at all. But they have done excellent work on that. And that, to be fair, it did solve that problem at Austria. There were various little bits that they still managed to be an own goal or two, with Oscar Piastri getting penalised in qualifying and things. So but to be fair, it worked well enough. And track limits only became an issue really after the race in Austin last year. The bigger thing here is the massive amount of resurfacing, because you ended up having Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton disqualified. Potentially there were other cars that ended up left in the race result that they just didn't get their planks checked. So we don't know the state of the legality there. But by resurfacing the bumps, that has always been a historical problem at this race, because it's built on a swamp. That massive charge up to turn one, that's all artificial. It's not actually like elevated like that. It's all been created like that. To iron out those bumps, that's one less headache for the teams and also the drivers as well. I mean, these ground effect cars, they just hate bumps. And if anything, that's a boost for Red Bull, because we just know when it comes to things like curbs and bumps, they don't like that. So that potentially is the bigger
and COTA need that as a circuit with the competition now with Vegas and Miami and other races that want to come on. And I think that they still need to be seen as the racer's preferred choice of destination. And I quite like that about Austin, that, you know, the crowd that go there are very different from the other two races, which are more like trade fairs and a trade show and, you know, that sort of side of things. This is actually for people who enjoy their racing. And I think that COTA need to have a good race where everyone comes away happy and there's no complaints.
Agreed.
Certainly one for the purists then. Now, what about one-stoppers? Last year, Charles Leclerc tried it and failed. Lewis Hamilton flirted with the idea of a one-stopper, then bailed at the last minute. Are we likely to see a one-stopper in 2024?
I haven't checked the weather. I don't know if what's the weather like?
I know when I do land from my flight where I'm going to be standing up stretching all the time, it's going to be 37 degrees.
Oh, perfect.
But it is cooling down. It will be, it's the charming late high 20s, early 30s temperature wise. But this is a high energy track.
Yeah.
It makes sense to do a two-stop race. And yeah, that I don't know, it's boring, but it always comes down to the tyres in Formula One. And it will reward those drivers that can handle the tyre management challenge. And again, Max is excellent at that. Hamilton's excellent at that. Norris is showing improved form on that as he goes.
Yeah, I do think someone's going to try it though, like we saw at Spa, George. Maybe.
Let's hope they've eaten enough or whatever it was. That was Russell's problem. Not having steak.
Someone's going to try a one-stopper. We'll wait and see if it pays off. Final moments then, prediction time. Slightly different predictions this time because I want to keep it really basic.
Yep.
McLaren, they lead the constructors. Red Bull and Max leads the drivers. What we're going to see, McLaren extend their lead in the constructors and Lando close the gap. What's the permutations? What are we likely to see here? We're going to see that Max is going to increase his lead, but what do you think is going to happen?
I think this is a big race. We mentioned big race for Red Bull, big race for Sergio Perez. You know, a lot of support there for him. I think that he needs to go well. I think we're looking at a podium for him. And then between the other two, Lando and Max, I don't know which way around it's going to be, but that's my podium, those three. Let's say Lando P1, Max P2, and Sergio Perez P3.
I reckon this is one of those races where McLaren will extend their lead in the constructors, but Max will increase his lead. I think it's a Verstappen victory ahead of Norris and Piastri. I have no faith in Perez being on the podium, unfortunately.
I'm being optimistic. Just going for the...
Famously, you are.
Yeah, always.
Very kind of you, very kind of you. And I'm sure he needs some optimism as well thrown his way. Look, gents, thank you very much indeed. Enjoy your flight. Like I say to anybody listening to this or watching this, if you are on a flight on Tuesday, going to Charlotte and you see some long-haired individual walking up and down the aisle doing weird stretching and dance moves, it's probably Alex Kalinauckas. Just lob him a biscuit and he'll go carry on his merry route down the aisle. Look, gents, thank you very much indeed. Enjoy your time over there. You're at home watching, are you?
I'm on holiday.
What?
Mexico, right?
Yeah, Mexico. Mexico, also called Turkey. Yeah.
Very nice, very nice. We'll see how your hair looks on the return. or your teeth, one of the two. Look, Ben, have a fantastic holiday. Enjoy your trip as well. Let us know in the comments what you think the podium will look like come COTA. And if you like this, make sure you like and subscribe to stay up to date with all the content. We've got 4 different episodes coming to you on the 4 different days ahead of the Grand Prix and during the Grand Prix itself. So make sure you tune in for that one. Until next time, though, thanks for watching.